Hey everyone, welcome back to term two and a very different style of learning for this term. Hope you all had a great break and are nice and rested, but you also at the same time did a little bit of work to keep you up to date. So what we're doing, as I told you at the end of last term, was we're starting or continuing on with managing employees under Area Study 2. But what we're doing now is looking at termination, different forms of termination before moving on to workplace agreements and awards, etc. So that's where we're starting. In relation to SAC and how SACs are going to run, we're still up in the air a little bit about it. What we'll probably be doing as we go along is having various forms of assessment online or doing them remotely, getting you to answer a number of questions, which we then put together to help us with from a ranking for ranking purposes for VCAR, if and when they make a decision as to how the Year 12 is going to play out during the year. Obviously, you've heard there's going to be an exam at the end of the year, but it's going to be a little bit later. There'll also be a GAT, which will be a little bit later, and the possibility that you'll also look at Year 11 results being used to determine your ATAR. I'm sure, though, that there will be part of your coursework that we're doing during the year will also be taken into consideration to establish that ATAR. But as soon as we hear more, we'll obviously pass it on to you. So the way we will conduct the online lessons is the same as we would in class. We'll just follow the key knowledge points from the study design. From a remote learning point of view, it probably means, and it makes the Year 12 studies a lot easier than the other year levels because there is a very set format to what we need to cover, and it will help us get through, and we'll keep the time frame in the same as we would as if we were in class. So we are up to in this area study, Unit 3, Area Study 2, we're up to Key Knowledge Point 7, which is termination management, including retirement, redundancy, resignation and dismissal, entitlements and transition issues. They're the issues that we need to cover, and we'll do that this week across the next couple of lessons. So termination will see us out this week as a good place to start. Before we get stuck into the content today, I want to show you a little clip from one of my favourite movies, which is called Office Space. It's used by Harvard Business School to look at all issues surrounding human resource management, management of the workforce within a workplace. It's a little bit dated, but it's still very topical for today. So unfortunately, I would have been able to show you this throughout our classes in class. So I'm going to put a couple of clips into the presentation here. So just give me a moment and we'll get it rolling.
Would you walk us through a typical day for you? Yeah, great. Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. That way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Space out? Yeah, I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work. Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more? Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TPS reports. The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care. Don't care? It's a problem of motivation, all right? Now, if I work my ass off and Initech ships a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the motivation? And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now.
I beg your pardon?
8 bosses.
8?
8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled. That and the fear of losing my job. But you know, Bob, that'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
Would you bear with me for just a second, please?
Okay.
What if, and believe me,
This is so hypothetical.
But what if you were offered some kind of a stock option equity sharing program? Would that do anything for you?
I don't know, I guess. Listen, I'm gonna go. It's been really nice talking to both of you guys.
Absolutely.
The pleasure's all on this side of the table, trust me.
Good luck with your layoffs, all right? I hope your firings go really well.
Excellent. Great.
So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll give you a few more clips as we go along. They're all quite enjoyable, but they do mimic what happens in real life in organisations. So you watch out for those in incoming presentations. So now on to the theory for this particular key knowledge point. We need to define termination. You need to know how to do that. So termination results from decisions made by either the employer or the employee to end the employment contract and relationship between the parties. So essentially that's what termination is. So termination can be voluntary or involuntary. This is from the employee perspective, whether they voluntarily leave the business or whether they are forced to leave the business involuntarily because the employer has decided that they're no longer required. Under both scenarios, the business as the employer and the employee need to manage this process correctly to ensure legal compliance while also acting in an ethical manner. Um, so we will cover that a little bit further on under transition issues. This is the table that outlines essentially how the termination works in the four different types. So we've got termination being voluntary or involuntary, and then we have two types of termination under voluntary and two under involuntary. So voluntary termination, so the employee is electing to terminate the employment relationship is either through resignation or retirement, and then involuntary is where the employer terminates the workplace agreement through retrenchment or through dismissal. So today we're going to look at the voluntary side of things, look at resignation and retirement. Okay, so voluntary termination is where when an employee decides to leave a business, either by resigning to go to another job or retiring from the workforce. So resign means that the voluntary termination occurs when an employee leaves the workplace that they're currently in, usually because they've got another job to go to. So they resign from their current position, give notice to their employer, and eventually move on to another position somewhere else. Retirement's a little bit differently. It's still different. It's voluntary, but retirees, they voluntary termination where an employee decides to permanently leave the paid workforce. So what they're doing, they're removing themselves from the workforce completely. They're not looking for another job. So retirement that's the key to that point. They're permanently leaving the paid workforce. They may go off and get voluntary work or something, but they're permanently leaving the paid workforce. So regardless of whether an employee resigns or retires, so this is still under voluntary, they are entitled to accrued entitlements, including payment of untaken annual leave, so they may not have used up all their annual leave and that's owing, so that gets paid to them, or they might have accrued long service leave which hasn't been taken yet, so that should also be paid to them as an entitlement when they resign or retire. Be careful when you're talking about entitlements that you don't talk about unused sick pay. This is not an entitlement which accrues to the employee when they leave the organisation. While they're still employed, they can take advantage of sick pay if they've got sick days and they get paid even though they're not at work because they're sick. However, this does not carry forward with the employee if they resign from the business, either as retiring or resignation. So from the business perspective, someone voluntarily leaving the business has an impact on the business, um, whether it be resignation or retirement. There's loss of talent from the business. There's always a cost of replacing an employee if they leave the business and they need to have someone else come in and fill that job. So the business is continuing rather than being downsized. If it's a situation where the employee needs to be replaced, there's the cost of recruiting someone else to fill the place. There can be a decline in morale within the business if the employee is a key employee and popular within an organisation. They could be members of teams, which a lot of businesses have these days, so working in groups that will cause the teams to be a little bit ineffective that they're involved in. And there could be a change in productivity within the organisation, which is the efficiency of an organisation. It could increase or decrease depending on how effective that employee leaving the business actually was within the organisation. If they weren't fully motivated, as we've seen in previous areas of previous points in this area of study. If they're not fully motivated, which means they weren't fully effective, then productivity would not be at its maximum. So a change with an employee leaving may be of benefit to the organisation. However, if they were a very efficient employee, fully motivated, and they leave to go to another business, it may be difficult to find someone in the short term who can be as productive as the employee that left, which could cause an overall decrease in productivity within the organisation. Okay, so here we go with the first of the learning activities. What we'd like you to do for this to get it back into the swing of things is to watch the Ed Rollo tutorial on termination management, which it goes for about 30 minutes. It covers the voluntary and the involuntary, but then that'll make it easier to take in the involuntary termination methods that we'll discuss tomorrow. Then there are questions at the end of that particular termination management section on Ed Rollo, which we also need you to do. If you can do those, that would be great. Finally, a little bit of a change to how the class page will operate, just to make it even easier for you to interact with me. There'll be a Google Hangout, but it won't be a Google Hangout that actually is assigned through the calendar. It'll just purely be a link which you'll click on through our business management page. So if during your lesson will be on hand, and you can click on that link if you need to talk to us about anything, if you've got a question about anything that can't be answered or hasn't been answered satisfactorily in the forum. You can click on the Google Hangout or the Google Chat link, and will be available during the class time to catch up one-on-one or through, as many as they like, go into that particular hangout. So try that tomorrow, and look forward to catching up with you all over the coming days. All the best.